Nero Wolfe and the Tea That Turned to Poison. It was one of those slant-light mornings that makes even West 35th Street look like it's trying to be Paris. Fritz had decided the day deserved lemon zest in the muffins and a hymn from Schubert, and I had decided the day deserved neither. I had an appointment with a grocer who considered delivery window an abstract concept, and Mr. Nero Wolfe had an appointment with 980 orchids that considered discipline a religion. Routine was humming, which meant danger was already stalking it. At 11:22 the doorbell rang, two staccato pecks that sounded like the finger behind them had opinions. When your boss is allergic to surprise and your cook is allergic to interruptions in his hollandaise, you learn to triage doorbells. I reached the front hall in 3 strides and opened the door to a messenger with a grin so professional it could have passed a lie detector. "Delivery," he said, and handed me a squat, handsome tin the color of pounded copper. No card, no bill, no return address beyond a stencil on the lid, formidable over a tea leaf logo. "I don't sign for illegible poetry," I told him. He shrugged at the universe. "Already signed by the sender. Prepaid. Enjoy." If there's a subtype of human I dislike more than a man who's certain of nothing, it's a man who's certain of everything and wrong. I watched him go, then hefted the tin. It was heavier than it looked and had the kind of lid that either popped easily or snapped your thumbnail in 2. I set it on the hall table and gave it the look I reserve for packages and suspects. Sometimes they do the same thing. "Archie?" Fritz called from the dining room, his voice steeped in butter. "Is that the grocer?" "Not unless he's branched into copperware." I carried the tin to the kitchen. Fritz wiped his hands on a towel and eyed it like it might be a new spice or a small bomb. You'd be surprised how often they overlap. "Tea," he said, taking in the logo, "or something pretending. The color is indecent." "What do you want me to do? Apologize to the color wheel?" I tapped the lid. No sender, no note, and a name that sounds like it wants to wrestle. Fritz pursed his lips. "Wolfe will not like this." There are phrases we say around the brownstone that do not require brains, like "the sun will rise" and "the Knicks will disappoint." "Wolfe will not like this" is in that category, but it never hurts to rehearse. I set the tin on the pantry shelf next to the jars of Ceylon and Oolong that Wolfe uses to lecture about the decline of civilization and occasionally to make a toddy when his throat sulks. Then I left it to glint in the dark. By 12:11, Wolfe was back from the plant rooms, having inflicted Latin upon orchids and discomfort upon Theodore, and had parked his 1/7 of a ton in the big chair behind his desk. I had just arranged the stack of morning mail on his blotter with the envelope flaps aligned, little touches that keep him from despair, when the doorbell pecked again. Same rhythm. Either our messenger had circled back for applause or life had developed a sense of humor. I opened the door to find a woman whose posture made me think of violin strings, pulled tight enough to sing or snap. She was mid-30s, built like an argument, with hair the black of a courtroom suit and eyes the pale gray of good steel. She wore a cream coat that said 5th Avenue and a mouth that said she'd bite it if it got in her way. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, and corrected herself. "Is Mr. Nero Wolfe receiving clients?" "He receives people," I told her. "Clients are a category he applies afterward. Depends how they behave. Come in." She did, unbuttoning the coat with decisive little plucks. She smelled faintly of something citrus and some other note I couldn't place. Sharp, green, impatient. In the office, Wolfe looked up, measured the disruption in the air like a barometer, and nodded once. "You are punctual," he said, though she hadn't given a time. "I hadn't yet scheduled myself to be unpunctual," she said. "I'm Lisette Avery." Names are fine. Context is better. I took the chair by the red leather couch where I could watch both faces. Wolfe steepled his fingers against his middle temple. If you're new, that's his forehead, and closed his eyes long enough for the room to adjust to his existence. "Miss Avery," he said, opening them, "you have brought trouble. Put it where I can reach it." She didn't flinch. "Someone put poison in my tea. If you're waiting for me to spill coffee at a line like that, you need a different narrator." I didn't blink. Wolfe didn't either, but he rarely does when he's awake. "Poison," he repeated, like he was sampling a spice he probably owned in triplicate. "You operate a tea room?" "I own Formidable," she said, and gave me a quick glance when my eyebrows went up. The copper tin in the pantry grinned in my memory. "A salon, not a room. We sell rare leaves and curate tastings. We do not poison our clientele." "Some clientele wish to be," Wolfe murmured. "Who attempted?" "2 nights ago," she said, "we held a private tasting for 4 invitees. The theme was summer oxidation, oolongs for the unconverted. One of the 4, Mr. Doyle, took a single sip of our Orient Belle and went the color of chalk. He vomited into his scarf, staggered, and made for the restroom. He recovered. He is alive. The hospital says he ingested something caustic but non-lethal. Detergent, possibly. Not my kitchen, not my staff, not my leaves." Wolfe pressed his lips together and let out a breath through his nose that I've heard for men who lie, men who bore, and men who serve inferior shad roe. "Police? They looked, they frowned, they took a statement, and they suggested we implement stricter safeguards. Meanwhile, Mr. Doyle is telling anyone with a glass of whiskey that we nearly killed him." "And you suspect sabotage," Wolfe said. "I don't suspect," she said. "I know, and I know who. But that won't do me any good if I can't prove it before the Department of Health makes an example. I cannot afford a scandal. Not now." She was lying or telling the truth or both. The only certainty was that she was running on something other than caffeine. Wolfe glanced at me. That glance is not a command. It's a door key. "Names," I said. "The other guests." She gave them like she'd filed them alphabetically. Camilla Penworth, food writer. Grayson Tull, importer with a grudge and a newsletter. Father Declan Moore, Jesuit, palate of a saint, budget of a monk. And Mr. Doyle, Harold Doyle, investor, loud. "And your staff that evening," Wolfe said. "My manager, Petya, Bulgarian, precise, suspicious of miracles. A new server, Roman, cautious. In the kitchen, just me and Nora. I brewed the Orient Belle myself. Petya poured it." "Your rivalries?" Wolfe asked, like he collects them in a ledger. She let her shoulders drop a fraction, a concession to honesty. "Tull has tried to undercut my suppliers. Camilla once wrote that my prices made caviar blush. Father Declan loves me for saving Darjeeling from Philistines, but he loves being contrary more. Doyle wanted a discount for volume. I declined because volume murders nuance and rent. And then there's Chen." "First mention," I said. "Priority suspect. Mr. Chen runs Celadon House. New money, old marketing. He hosted an event last week with a tea champagne that was in fact kombucha with ambition. He wants my customers. He wants my source for Orient Belle. He wants, more than anything, to be seen as a man who knows what he's doing quickly." Wolfe twitched an eyelid. "In Wolfe, that's animation. You said you know who." "I think Tull," she admitted. "He had a bag with him. He's sloppy, and he would have loved the headline, but it could have been Chen sending someone. He sent flowers the next morning. Orchids, actually." Fritz sneezed in the kitchen. There are coincidences, and then there are jokes the day makes to keep you humble. Wolfe's gaze drifted, not away from her, but toward a point over her right shoulder where thoughts arranged themselves. "Miss Avery, why come to me? You must know my indifference to tea." That wasn't modesty. Tea to Wolfe is a beverage that couldn't decide what it wanted to be when it grew up. He'll drink it if a throat doctor is involved, or if Fritz has devised a custard that begs for it, but affection is not in the room. I came, she said, because whoever did this sent you a sample. I don't often feel my scalp move, but it did then. Wolfe's eyes shifted to mine. Archie. The tin, I said. Copper. Formidable logo. Came at 11:22. No note. I could feel the pantry shelf in my fingers. Lisette Avery nodded once. I did not send it. If it's what I think it is, it's either meant to frighten me or implicate me. Or you. You flatter yourself, Wolfe said mildly. And me? Extravagantly. I don't flatter, she said. I look. Whoever tampered with that tasting wants to expand the stage, and Mr. Wolfe's brownstone is a stage. Don't tell me you don't know that. I won't say I liked her, but I liked that line. Wolfe's mouth considered a smile and declined. Archie, he said, retrieve it. I went for the pantry. The tin sat where I'd left it, pretending innocence with the confidence of a debutante. I brought it back and put it on the blotter. Wolfe, who can be as delicate as a cat when curiosity combs his whiskers, touched the lid with a forefinger and then drew his hand away as if etiquette had been violated. Open it, Archie, he said. Your thumb or mine? Yours. He leaned back and closed his eyes. If the lid had coughed cyanide, he would have called that regrettable. I pried. It resisted, then surrendered with a soft exhale. The scent that rose wasn't rot or pharmacy. It was floral and honeyed, with a toasted note like clean hay, and under it a thread of something too clean, like a hospital that's trying to pretend it's a hotel. I set the lid aside. Orient Belle, Lisette said, breathing in and keeping her face steady. White tip oolong, bitten by leafhopper, oxidized by nature and patience, and something else. Wolfe opened his eyes. Do not touch it further, he said. Fritz! He didn't raise his voice, but the house understands his air pressure. Fritz appeared in the doorway, towel in hand. Yes, sir. Seal this and place it where it cannot be molested, Wolfe said. We will not have the kitchen invaded by impertinences. If a kitchen could salute, ours did. Fritz whisked the tin away as though it were a duchess with a tendency to faint. Lisette watched it go, then looked at Wolfe. Will you take this, Mr. Wolfe? I can pay your fee, but I can't pay for time. If this isn't solved in days, we are finished. Wolfe studied her face as if there were footnotes written in the pores. No one can pay for time, he said. We hire it from appetite and regret. Miss Avery, you're agitated. You also have the self-command to confine your agitation to your spine. Good. Archie. Yes, sir. Call Mr. Cather to learn about Harold Doyle's current vigor and whether he emits alacrity or bile. Then telephone Mr. Long Cohen and inform him we have received unsolicited tea. Keep his curiosity on a leash. After that, make an appointment with Miss Penworth that flatters her schedule and undermines her dignity. Inform Theodore that for today's 4 o'clock feeding, he must endure the orchids. Without me, I shall not return to the plant rooms. I will be thinking. I blinked. I've heard him accept cases with less embroidery and with more insult, but seldom with the plant rooms jilted. Lisette's eyes sharpened. She'd noticed too. You will take it? She asked. I will consider it, Wolfe said. While considering, I will act. You will leave a list of your suppliers, staff and clients from the last fortnight, annotated with your opinions swollen and your facts emaciated. Both are wanted. You will not speak to Mr. Tull, Mr. Chen, Mr. Doyle, or Father Moore. You will tell Petya to count every cleaning supply in your establishment and record the counts in ink. You will bring me the inventory by 6. She exhaled, which for some people is acceptance. For her, it was a signature. Thank you. Not yet, Wolfe said. Gratitude is for outcomes. Mr. Goodwin will show you out." On the stoop, she turned to me. "Was that bluster?" "Pure cowardice," I told her. "He's terrified someone is misusing a beverage." She almost smiled. "You like him?" "That's above my pay grade." She gave me a card, formidable in debonair sans serif, and descended the steps as if gravity were a contract she had negotiated because she had to. I watched her slide into a cab, and then shut the door on the street, the building, and the particular weather a woman like that brings. Back in the office, Wolfe had not moved. He doesn't need to when his mind is sprinting. "You don't like tea," I said, taking my chair. "You don't like clients who think they know who did it. You don't like being a stage." "No," he said. And yet you're in." He let the air sit. Then, "Someone reached into this house without asking. The last man to do that was Inspector Kramer, and he had a warrant. The affront is minor, the principle is not. Also, Fritz is fond of that Bell nonsense in custards. I won't have it impugned." I grinned. "Moral outrage and dessert, in that order or the other." "Do your calls," he said. "We will see whether Miss Avery's tea is poison to her business or merely her vanity, and whether its odor is detergent or design. There are days our first step into a case is a footprint on someone else's floor. Sometimes it's a tin on our pantry shelf. Either way, once Wolfe decides that a boundary has been smudged, he doesn't sit still. He just sits heavier." I dialed. Cather answered on the third ring with the voice of a man who had made his peace with buzzing phones. He confirmed he was at Roosevelt and confirmed with a sigh flavored by institutional coffee that Harold Doyle was in one piece. The phrase he used was esophageal irritation consistent with dilute surfactant exposure, which sounds better if you haven't met a bottle of dish soap. No organ damage, no lingering danger, just a throat that would remember the encounter every time a waiter put down a glass. He'd be discharged this afternoon if he behaved. I thanked Cather for making a hospital sound like a men's club and hung up. Lon Cohen, when he's on a leash, tugs like a terrier that has seen a parade. I told him we had received an unsolicited tin of high-minded oolong, and that a society investor had done a brief impersonation of a cautionary tale. He wanted names, addresses, and a quote he could pretend I hadn't given him. I gave him none of the above and hinted that a rival tea impresario was sending orchids as apologies or signatures. He hummed like a printing press. "Archie, if this is a restaurant scare that turns into a city item, you'll be sorry you didn't hand it to me first." I told him I'm always sorry and promised to call when we had more than foam. He cursed amiably and hung up to go torment the health desk. Camilla Penworth made me work for an appointment by explaining her editorial calendar, her Pilates regimen, and a lunch that would define the next decade of sandwiches. I told her I could be at her office at 3. She sneered that 3 meant 2:58, and then consented to be flattered by punctuality. I wrote it down and went to tell Wolfe I was off to sample the world beyond the front door. He had not moved, and the shape of his stillness said he wouldn't till the sun made other plans. He listened to the Cather report, grunted at Lon's leash, and allowed that Miss Penworth at 3 would do. "Observe carefully," he said, like I had a tendency to take notes with my eyes closed. "Return to Formidable first. Look at the kitchen. Count nothing. Counting is for the anxious. Smell, then the floor, then the people." It was a good afternoon for not spilling tea. Formidable occupied the kind of corner space that says rent is predicated on status anxiety. Inside it was all pale wood, brushed brass and glass jars that would have made a perfumer reconsider his life choices. A woman at the counter tasted something with reverence. A man in the window typed about it as if he were discovering oxygen. Petya, the manager, was the only thing out of place because she belonged. "Miss Avery telephoned," she said, before I had decided whether to open with a smile or a badge I don't carry. "You are Mr. Goodwin. You will prefer facts over interpretations, but I cannot separate my facts from myself. so you will accept both. I make do, I told her. Show me where you brew, where you clean, and where someone could be an idiot without being seen. She led me through a door that said, "Employees only," in a font that apologized for existing. The kitchen was the kind that calms health inspectors and inflames landlords. Stainless everything, shelves you could salute, and a narrow galley of counters where instruments sat like surgical tools. Nora, the other name from Lisette's list, nodded without removing her attention from a scale and a timer that were arguing with gravity. Petya showed me a bank of teas, each in labeled canisters, each with a small clip that held a card with Latin, altitude, and romance. She showed me the kettles, the goosenecks, the thermometers, the towels folded like trigonometry. "And detergent?" I asked. She pointed to a locked cabinet under the sink. Inside sat a squat blue jug with a cheerful whale promising oceans of cleanliness. It had a broken plastic seal that had been taped back down with a neat band of Claire. "Someone from the department looked," she said. "We keep inventory. Nora and I use gloves. Roman does not touch the back." "Roman is the new server. He is a man attempting to be invisible," she said. "He succeeds only until he needs to ask a question." "And where were your eyes during the tasting?" "On the pour," she said without apology. Miss Avery brewed. I decanted from the Gaiwan into fairness pitchers, then into cups. No one touched their cups except the drinkers. Mr. Doyle lifted his and performed. The others tasted and looked inconvenienced by drama. Father Declan went to assist because he's a man who thinks his collar grants him authority over lungs. Mr. Tull kept his seat and smirked. Miss Penworth wrote in a little book. "The cups," I said. "Where were they before?" "In the lowboy, drying," she said. "We air dry, no residue." I smelled the room. Wolfe's instructions are not metaphors. There was the warm, humid scent of tannin and grass, and a top note of citrus that matched Lisette's coat. Under it was the ghost of something cleaner than clean, a slickness without substance. It wasn't strong enough to accuse, but it was smug. There are smells like that. They think they're better than you. I asked to see the restroom and the back hallway. In the trash, a scarf like a casualty of taste lay wrapped in a plastic bag. It smelled like a janitor's closet. Petya said Mr. Doyle had demanded it be kept for posterity or litigation. The department had sniffed, photographed, and moved on. I asked if I could take a photo. She permitted it and tried not to crack a smile when I told the scarf to say cheese. Roman appeared in the doorway, young, hair carefully unintended, posture built by apologizing to chairs. "The gentleman is here," he said to Petya, eyes sliding to me and back. "Mr. Tull." "You will tell him Miss Avery is not available," Petya said. "He will tell you that he is never available to people who say that. Then you will smile and offer him water." She turned to me. "Would you enjoy a performance?" I declined. I prefer my shows on my schedule. I went out the side door and watched through the glass as Grayson Tull, tall, tailored, with the smile of a man who bills by the minute, made his case, accepted water, and installed himself at a table that said he planned to be seen more than served. As I watched, Father Declan strolled in, plain black, plain face, a pleasant aura that said he excused everyone and himself the least. He and Tull exchanged nods that felt like chess moves. I left them to their theater and headed for Penworth's office in a mid-rise that had decided art was a price point. At 2:56, I let the receptionist's eyebrows judge me. At 2:58, Camilla Penworth ushered me into a room with books, plants, and a framed tweet misquoting her. She was fox-bright, mid-30s, hair clipped short to show she didn't need it longer. She extended a hand with fingers that had written reviews that made chefs cry. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I drink tea for a living. This week I also survived it. Ask." "You wrote?" I said. that Formidable's prices made caviar blush. "You still drink there?" "I drink where the conversation is," she said, "and where the leaves are not bullied. Miss Avery is exacting and theatrical. That combination invites enemies and disciples. I am occasionally both, depending on the infusion." "Tell me about the night," I said. She told me, and it matched the bones Petya had displayed. Brew, pour, sip, drama. Her eyes, when she said Doyle's name, did a small, satisfying dance. "He is a man who believes volume is a substitute for wit. He wants exclusivity because it hurts other people. He likely brought his own scarf so the fainting would have a cushion." "Tal," I said, "ambitious. He treats tea like a brand he can personally improve through exposure to himself. He attempted to poach Lisette's importer last spring and failed because men who spend their lives on Sichuan hillsides dislike being lectured about margins." "Father Declan?" "A palate with ethics," she said. "He is more interested in whether something is true than whether it is fashionable. He is also, I suspect, amused by all of us." "And Mr. Chen?" I asked. She tilted her head. "A marketing mind in search of a soul. His tea champagne tasted like surrender. He sent orchids because he wanted to be in the conversation without attending the event. That's a tactic, not an apology." I asked about the cups, the lowboy, the possibility of a wipe, a dab, a ghost. She nodded, eyes sharp now. If it wasn't in the fairness pitcher, it was in one cup, which means a touch after pouring, or a prepared film before. That points to someone near the cups at the last second. "Staff," I said. "Or a guest with long sleeves and longer practice," she said. "I didn't see it. That annoys me." When I left, I had a page of notes and a sense that the room had been curated to persuade me she was clever. It worked. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe heard me out without interrupting except to request the detergent brand and the lock quality. When I had finished, he nodded once. "Not the pot," he said. "A single cup, before or after the pour. The scarf is theatre, which obscures effort. Mr. Tull performs, Father Declan consoles, and Ms. Penworth observes. Miss Avery brews, Petya pours. You will return this evening. We will invite Mr. Doyle to call." Here, he said. "If the stage has been expanded, we will set the lights ourselves." Doyle did not need to be invited. He needed to be told he was expected. When men like Harold tell you they might swing by, you set a time and give it a door. I called the hospital and found he had already been discharged with a pamphlet called "When Your Throat Reminds You of Your Choices." His doorman put me through, and he came on with a voice that sounded like sandpaper apologizing to velvet. I said Mr. Wolfe would see him at 7. He harumphed that his calendar was a homicide scene and then agreed, which is how you spell relief when you think you've been poisoned, and a famous fat man offers an audience. Wolfe, who dislikes both supplicants and clocks, approved the hour with a nod that meant he decided to be patient. "Before then," he said, "you will make another pass at Formidable. Do not alert Miss Avery. Listen for dissonance. It is early evening. Commerce makes people sloppy." I went. The wind had picked up on 35th and tried to convince the brownstone to migrate. Formidable, under its warm lights, had shed daytime poise for a murmur that pretended to be intimacy. The front tables were populated by people who read menus like they'd make them better by staring. Petya's eyebrows acknowledged me without diverting attention from a man who was photographing steam as if it had a soul. Back of house smelled cleaner, the tea notes buried under citrus, and a faint anesthetic hum. Nora was off. A boy with careful ears had replaced her on the scale. Roman hovered between lanes and nearly collided with me twice. I asked about the inventory. Petya tilted her head toward a clipboard on a hook, pages neat enough to pass for typeset. She had written counts, dates, and the small satisfactions of an orderly person. The detergent jug had been weighed, not measured. A sticky note read, 8 Oz since morning. Usage, wiping service trays only. Investigate. You lock it? I asked. Always, she said. Miss Avery has long believed cleanliness without restraint is a vice. I agree. The lock is discreet, not impressive, but it tells an honest person what they may touch. Dishcloths? I said. Gloves. All counted, she said. One microfiber cloth missing since yesterday. It may have eloped with a saucer. Roman loses things because he thinks about not losing them. Roman flushed. I put the cloth in the wash, he said. I swear. You swear you intended to, Petya corrected. On my way out, I brushed Mr. Tull's table. He was conducting a private interview with his phone about a future series on accessible leaves. He stopped long enough to smile like a billboard. Mr. Goodwin, tell Mr. Wolfe if he needs a primer on modern distribution, I bill. I'll have Fritz write you a check, I said. Father Declan looked up from a small clay cup at the next table and gave me a nod that conceded the world's flaws. He rose to stretch, came close enough to speak without being overheard, and said, Miss Avery is not careless, but pride obscures care as thoroughly as negligence does. I will pray for her humility and your success. The first will be hardest. Father, I said, if your prayers include a spare set of eyes, lend them to the low boy. I already did, he said mildly, and sat back down. At 6:40, I brought Harold Doyle up the brownstone steps. He wore a scarf that had not seen detergent and a blazer that had seen money. He had the pinkness of a man who thinks a brisk walk cures character. In the office, he looked around the way men do when they've paid for tables like ours and are surprised to see one owned, not rented. Mr. Doyle, Wolfe said. Sit. Water. If that's all you're serving, Doyle said, and took the red leather chair as if it owed him interest. He touched his throat. I'm fine, by the way. The doctors acted like I'd gargled a tide pool. Scare tactics. I've drank worse in Soho. You have drunk worse, Wolfe corrected. Past tense. Your frequency will decrease. Describe. Doyle glanced at me, as men do when they aren't sure which of us is going to bite. I gazed back with my most homely innocence. He ran through it, the invite, the private tasting, the preciosity of descriptions he'd enjoyed mocking, the sip that hit like a janitor's joke, the scarf, the restroom. He performed the indignation with skill and then beamed at his survival. Why? Wolfe said. Were you there? Because I invest in things that want to become bigger things, Doyle said. Miss Avery wants another location and a book. I like books I can turn into whiskey. Also, I was invited. You wanted a discount, Wolfe said. You asked for one in advance. You implied exposure and patronage justified preferential rates. Doyle shifted like a boy on a cold pew. That's one way to characterize business. It is mine, Wolfe said. Who besides Miss Avery knew you would attend? Everyone, Doyle said. She posted a story. Oh, you don't. She announced the tasting, and my assistant RSVP'd from my account. Grayson Tull knew because he texted me that he'd be there to benchmark. Chen knew because he watches all of us the way a vulture watches a cattle drive. You met Mr. Chen that day? I asked. Earlier, he admitted. Lunch at Lin Yao. He wanted me to try his reserve flight. I told him I was already booked. He told me Lisette was using him for publicity because she needed a skeptic at the table. Did he send you flowers after your brush with mortality? Wolfe inquired. Doyle's mouth tried a smirk and landed on a grimace. Orchids. I don't read into. Gestures from men who want my signature. Miss Penworth, Wolfe said, took notes at the tasting. Doyle squinted. Always. She writes in a little moleskin like a spy pretending to be a mouse. What did she note about the cups? Wolfe asked. He blinked. He was not stupid. He was attached to his own highlight reel. She noted the glaze. She said the cups were too slick for the leaf grade, that the nose would slide. She wrote something like low boy swap. But I didn't know what that meant. It meant, Wolfe said, that she wondered if the cups had been switched between drying and service. Doyle tapped his armrest. So, what? I was the mark and got the doctored one, or I wasn't the mark and someone else was and I intercepted? You were either the target or the billboard, Wolfe said. Which prospect appeals to you least? I don't enjoy being used, he said. Nonsense, Wolfe murmured. You enjoy it if the rate is right. He turned his head a fraction. Fritz? Fritz entered with a tray and the copper tin and a domed cloche you could take a wedding from. He set them on the credenza. Wolfe did not look at Doyle while he spoke. Mr. Doyle, he said, before you came, this tin was sealed with a strip of clear tape placed by my chef. He logged the cut, position, and length. Now, the tape is different. The end is ragged, and the overlap is shorter by a 1/4 inch. The lid, which I placed to the left of the tin under the cloche, is to the right. Fritz? I did not touch it, Fritz said, a front gracefully contained. I locked it in the pie safe and brought it as you asked. The safe, I said, was locked when you retrieved it. Locked, Fritz said, but the key was in the bowl by the back door rather than on its hook. We all took a second to consider the physics of a key that relocates itself. I looked at Wolfe. He was not pleased. An intrusion into the brownstone is like moving altars around in a church while the priest is glaring. Archie, he said, very soft, you will telephone Mr. Panzer and ask him to inspect our rear entrance, the safe, and the route between. You will then visit Formidable and collect their detergent brand in a jar, with Petya's consent or without. Mr. Doyle, do not protest. My cook is not the thief. Your arrival time and our discovery are unfortunate neighbors, not roommates. Doyle threw up his hands. I wasn't accusing your butler. He is our cook, Wolfe said, and I was accusing no one. But someone, very recently, wished either to add to this tin or to make us believe it had been added to. Either way, my home has been touched. I will not have that. Doyle swallowed. It made his throat hurt to watch. Then you think this is bigger than a jealous shop? I think, Wolfe said, it is precisely jealousy, in the mature form called ambition, and I think someone competent is using an incompetent as a smokescreen. Doyle, I said, where were you between 5 and 6? He bristled. Are you serious? Only professionally, I said. I was at home, he said. My assistant can confirm. I wouldn't break into your kitchen to tamper with a tea tin. I would hire someone and then deny it elegantly. Thank you, Wolfe said. You may go. Keep your scarf. Avoid public lamentations for 24 hours. If a reporter telephones, tell him you have engaged counsel and are refraining. You may imply the counsel is formidable. Doyle rose, half offended and half relieved. On the threshold he turned. If you catch Tull or Chen messing with me, bill me for the bonus. We will bill Miss Avery, Wolfe said. You may offer her a discount. When he had gone, the room let go of a tight breath. Wolfe closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose with forefinger and thumb, a gesture he uses for mankind. Then he opened them, and they were knives. Archie, he said, someone meant to tell me I was on the board. Good, we will use their courtesy. I dialed Saul. Saul answered on the second ring with his usual economy. I told him the back door and the pie safe had developed free will. He said he'd be there in 20 and hung up to spare syllables. Wolfe, who can wait for a decade if you feed him properly, told me to get the detergent sample from Formidable and to sniff for stupidity. I took the cloche off the credenza long enough to check the lid orientation again. It still sat right when it had been left. You can call that paranoia. Around here we call it note-taking. The sidewalk had cooled to the point where the city remembered it was autumn. Formidable's front was busy enough to cover a small war. Inside, Petya clocked me and met me halfway to spare us both conversations with the paying public. I told her I needed 8 ounces of their cleaner in a jar and the loan of 1 cup from the set used at the tasting. She asked whether I preferred a labeled jar and a clean conscience or something improvised and plausible. I told her the jar could wear a tuxedo for all I cared. Just make sure the contents hadn't been adulterated by enthusiasm. She unlocked the cabinet with a small key she wore on a chain, weighed the blue jug, and poured exactly 8 ounces into a glass container that once housed quince jam. So she labeled it in her neat hand and signed the tape. Watching Petya handle tape made me appreciate the tape on our tin even more. She led me to the lowboy. The cups were inverted soldiers on a towel, glazed soft and pale. She selected one from a stack on the left. "These were Sunday's set," she said. "I marked the bottom with a dot you cannot see unless you expect it." She briskly rinsed it and set it on the counter. "Humor me," I said. "Water test." She filled a pitcher and poured a slow arc over the cup's rim. The water sheeted evenly, then hesitated at one spot, a tight beading that chased itself. Petya's lips compressed. "I polished with rice chaff," she said. "No product." "Someone did," I said. "Beading is vanity, even sheeting is honesty." She nodded once like a sentence punctuated. Roman drifted into the doorway, saw our faces, and chose elsewhere. I asked for a second cup from another stack. This one let the water run like glass should. I pocketed the first cup. She didn't flinch. "Miss Avery told me to cooperate with precise men and ignore dramatic ones," she said. "Which am I?" "You alternate," she said. "Do not become dramatic." On my way out, I almost collided with a man whose haircut hadn't decided whether it wanted to be a brand. He wore a jacket that hid its price only from itself and a smile that knew where mirrors lived. He offered a hand. "Caleb Chen," he said, as if I'd asked. "Celadon House." "I know the address," I said. "Do you want me to mail this jar to you?" He looked at the glass in my bag, noted the jam label, and let the smile recalibrate. "I came to pay respects," he said. "A colleague suffered a mishap. In hospitality, we take care of narratives." "In homicide, we do too," I said. "What are you in?" "Culture," he said, "and logistics." His eyes slid over my shoulder toward the counter. "Miss Avery is not here." I told him she was busy, and he decided his respects could be paid en route to somewhere with better lighting. When he was on the sidewalk, I asked Petya, who had told Chen to drop by. "The city," she said. "He is everywhere there is a sight line. If he was here during the tasting, I did not see him." "Did he send anyone?" I asked. She thought. "He has a girl, bright, who asks questions like a compliment. Not Sunday." I took the jar and the cup and left before ambition made more small talk. On the corner, a man in a cap pretended to check a delivery app and used the phone's dark screen to watch Formidable's reflection. He clocked me, then looked away too fast. I let him see me look. Sometimes being seen seeing is useful. He stayed put. Fine. We could share the sidewalk. Back at the brownstone, Saul arrived 3 minutes before me and headed straight to the kitchen with a walk that says he owns every floor he steps on. Fritz met us with a dish towel like a flag of truce. Saul held up a hand without looking. He visited the back door, the jam, the key bowl, and the safe. He didn't talk while he worked. He never does. He used an LED that made dust think about its life choices and a loupe that has found more trouble than most magnifying glasses dream of. He came into the office at 7:15 and stood, which is his way of making Wolfe look up faster. "Back door lock was not picked," he said. "Latch was shimmed with a piece of polyethylene packaging, the kind they use on shirt collars, thin and strong. There's a very faint nick in the strike plate. Fresh. Whoever did it knew doors." The key bowl had 2 sets of oil marks from fingers in the last 6 hours. One is Fritz. The other has a trace of talc or powdered glove. Cheap latex leaves a dust. That person handled the key, went to the safe, and opened it with the key. No marks on the safe lock. The tape on the tin was lifted with a blade and relaid with the same strip. A tiny fiber from a cheap microfiber cloth is embedded under the cut. Color: lime. Roman flushed from the kitchen doorway so fast I could feel it. I filed that and didn't angle my head. Wolfe didn't either. He asked, "Timing?" "Between 5 and 6:30, Saul said. Front door was not used. They knew the back path. Fritz inhaled to assert his innocence and stopped when Wolfe turned a fingertip toward him. "No one is accusing you," Wolfe said. "Your kitchen is a fortress with a servant's entrance. Someone found the servant." I set the jar and the cup on the desk. Saul took the cup, ran water across it from our carafe, and watched the beading with the same lack of vanity Petya had. "Film," he said. "The detergent you've got there will do it if applied and rinsed poorly. A very light film will not taste in water, but will carry a nose of clean on hot liquor." Wolfe closed his eyes a moment, then opened them. "Archie, telephone Miss Avery. Ask if one of her cloths is lime. Do not accuse. Then call Miss Penworth and inform her I require her presence tomorrow at 11. Extend the same requirement to Mr. Tull and Father Moore. Mr. Doyle may attend or not. He prefers not to be used, but is always available to be seen." I called Lisette first. She answered like she'd been sitting on the phone. When I asked about cloth colors, she didn't pretend not to understand. "We have 2 limes," she said. "One is missing from yesterday's count." "Where was Roman yesterday at 4? I asked. "Because if you're going to be unfair, do it directly." "In the front, learning to carry 3 cups and a morale," she said. "Petya would have chained him to the espresso machine if we had one." I scheduled the 11 o'clock. She didn't argue. She sounded relieved. I called Camilla next. She made a joke about subpoenas and then said of course her calendar could use some moral nutrition. Tull's assistant answered and promised to strap him into a chair at 11. The assistant sounded like he enjoyed strapping. Father Declan said he would be honored and that truth benefited from daylight. If I gave him our address, he would bring scones for Fritz. I told him Fritz doesn't accept bribes. He said they were for me. When I hung up, Wolfe was not exuding contentment. He was arranging it. He looked at the tin and the cup as if they were uncooperative witnesses who'd break if the room were marginally warmer. "Someone made an impression of our habits," he said. "They watched how we secure, where we hang, when we forget the hook. They used a cheap cloth and a cheaper glove and relied on the vanity of brands to insulate them. They believe we will look for sophistication and miss economy." "Chen," I said. "He likes to be seen curating." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But consider Mr. Tull, who adores demonstrations, or Miss Penworth, whose profession is to observe and whose aversion to theatrics may extend to engineering them for contrast. Or Miss Avery, whose pride is a third rail and could spark an elaborate defense." "Father Declan?" I asked. "He will prefer truth even if it scorches his allies," Wolfe said. "Therefore someone will attempt to place him where he must choose wrong. Do not let them." Saul shifted his weight. "You want me parked out back tonight?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Wolfe said. "If our visitor returns, I want to know whether their courage increases with dusk. Archie, go to Formidable once more. Walk the alley. See whether our friend with the cap continues to watch. If he does, borrow his cap. Borrow with or without paperwork. Charm him," Wolfe said. "Failing that, bore him till he flees." I went. The alley was nursing the day's heat like a grudge. The cap was still there, attached to a man who had misjudged the line between casual and inert. I leaned on the wall beside him and told him a story about insurance that would have made a statue blink. He lasted 4 minutes before remembering he had to be anywhere else. I let him go, took 2 photos of his departing shoes, and made a note. Soles with a triangular cutout that would pattern dirt like a cheap heraldry. Back inside, Wolfe had his eyes closed and his lips shaped around a word he wasn't saying. He opened them for me. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will invite them into my office and pour nothing. They will pour themselves." Saul called at 1:45 with the voice he uses when the city thinks it's quieter than it is. He had parked himself in the brownstone's shadow with a view of the back door and the alley that pretends to be a street. At 9:30, a man in a cap like my friend from Formidable ambled by, developed an urgent need to smoke without lighting anything, and tested his reflection in the window of a parked sedan. At 10, he had acquired a partner with the shoulders of a Jim and the steps of a courier. They didn't touch anything. They measured the dark, decided it had already been measured, and left west toward 9th. "Shoes?" I asked. "Cheaper end of designer," Saul said. "Triangular tread that wants to be unique. They both wore it. Twins by retail, not by birth." "License plates?" "They took cabs, and the cabs decided they had blurry faces. I have a decent look at the cap man's profile if we need an artist who works for food." "Fritz can sketch," I said. "But you don't ask him unless you want the suspect to look like a roulade." "More tomorrow," Saul said, and hung up because the night owed him attention. I slept with one ear on the house and got up with it still there. Fritz greeted the day with a tray of apricot scones and a temper held in place by nutmeg. On the stoop was a box that pretended to be innocent by being brown. I brought it in, opened it with my key, and found orchids arranged like an argument. A card tucked like a secret into the stems read, "To speed recovery and conversation. C." It did not specify which of the two needed speeding. Wolfe came down at 11-20 with the air of a man who has consented to daylight on his terms. He looked at the orchids, read the card, and made a noise a botanist makes when someone uses a Latin name as a cocktail garnish. "Put those in the pantry," he told me. "Fritz is not to see the card. He will take it personally." "He should," I said. "They're establishing a tradition." "Traditions are for the incapable," he said. "We will end this one." At 9:30, I went to Celadon House without calling ahead because some conversations go better when the other party hasn't rehearsed. Celadon was the sort of retail temple that sells an experience in a shade of green that money likes to repeat. Staff drifted like curated steam. A young woman with sharp eyes and a notebook that didn't apologize met me halfway. "Welcome," she said. "Are you seeking curation or clarity?" "Neither," I said. "I'm seeking Mr. Chen." She held my look and returned it with interest. "He curates clarity at 10 on Tuesdays and clarity of curation at 10:30. I can check if he'll see you between." "Tell him Goodwin," I said. "So he'll either take me or have the pleasure of refusing." She glided away. I looked down and saw triangular tread prints ghosted in the fine dust that gathers where style meets construction. They led toward the back hallway. A delivery man rounded the bend carrying boxes of reserve flight glasses, sneakers doing their best to imitate the print. Not a verdict, just a chiming coincidence. Chen met me near a wall of porcelain that looked like it had been polished by monks. He offered his smile again, updated to daytime. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "how can hospitality be of service to investigation?" "By staying in one lane," I said. "You sent orchids to Doyle and to us. You sign your correspondence with a consonant. You have staff who wear shoes trying to be a logo. Do those facts want to be friends?" "They want to be noticed," he said, "which they have been. I send orchids when someone survives fright. It's polite. As for shoes, I cannot police fashion." "You can purchase it," I said. "Sunday night, any one of yours drift by Formidable." "If they did," he said, "they drifted as private citizens. We do not poach. We inspire. Did you inspire Tull?" "I don't have to," he said. "He arrives where there is applause." "And did you lunch with Doyle before he performed?" He shrugged gracefully. "We broke bread and ambition. He did not invest." "Yet," I said. "Yet," he allowed. "If Miss Avery diminishes, space opens, It's the market's way, not mine. I left him with that and took a slow walk behind the building. The alley had a smell you could license as urban. Damp cardboard, coffee grounds, and the faint, cheerful breath of detergent. A lime microfiber cloth lay flattened near a drain like a frog that hadn't hopped fast enough. I nudged it with my shoe, folded it with a pen, and slid it into a bag. The triangular tread had signed the dust here, too. 3 sharp chevrons with a nick in one arm where the rubber had peeled. At 10:45, I was back with Wolfe. Saul had returned, reported the night's cap ballet, and now sat unobtrusively in the yellow chair with the posture of a man who had slept in segments and woke in one piece. I put the lime cloth on Wolfe's desk. He didn't touch it. He looked at it as if it had written him an insulting letter. "Archie," he said, "place that next to the cup. I've engaged Inspector Kramer for noon. He will not bring lilies." "Kramer will not enjoy being told he is a prop," I said. "He is always a prop," Wolfe said. "He props up the idea that reality belongs to his department. He also enjoys me more than he permits himself to know." At 11:05, the bell rang in a sequence that promised variety. Camilla Penworth arrived first, in a dress that could take notes on its own. She relieved us all by smelling like grapefruit rather than detergent. She gave the orchids a glance that displayed opinion and sat without being asked, pen already out as if she meant to annotate the air. Grayson Tull followed with the accessory of a man accustomed to choosing the chair that photographs best. He took the one angled to the light and tested it with a small shift of his shoulders. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "I'm honored to be summoned." He meant the opposite, but he wore the words correctly. Father Declan came third, carrying a small white box with the gravity of a man transporting his mother's jam. Fritz accepted it as a matter of ritual and not bribery. The priest's eyes took in the room, paused on the cloche, and moved on, having recognized temptation and let it pass. Lisette came last at 2 minutes past and did not apologize for believing clocks should wait for her. She sat forward, elbows on knees, and kept her eyes on Wolfe like he was a lecture she had paid dearly to attend. Wolfe let the room settle the way batter settles before a bake. Then he fixed the small assemblage with a look that was 3 parts courtesy and 1 part warning. "Thank you," he said. "You are here because my home has been touched, Miss Avery's enterprise has been meddled with, and Mr. Doyle's throat has been introduced to commerce. These are annoyances. I dislike annoyances." Tull smiled, because he thought this was theatre and he likes to applaud himself. Camilla's pen made a small, happy sound against paper. Father Declan folded his hands and prepared to forgive us all. Lisette's jaw set and stayed. "I will be brief," Wolfe said, which is a sentence he utters as a challenge to fate. A film was applied to a cup. It carried a scent of clean and the ghost of caustic. It is the method of a person who believes in appearances and resents precision. It is also the method of someone who needed to accomplish harm without a lab or a budget. Camilla's eyes cut to Toole, then to Lisette, then back to Wolfe. Tull feigned outrage he hadn't been assigned yet. Lisette stared at the cup as if will could strip it. "Before I inform Inspector Kramer of your relative virtues," Wolfe went on, "we will perform a small exercise. Mr. Goodwin." He flicked 2 fingers. I rose, took the beaded cup and 3 clean twins, and set them in a line on the edge of the desk. Saul poured water into each from the carafe, not to brim, and we watched it sheet or hesitate. Only the marked one performed its little dance. "Come," Wolfe said, not loud, but complete. "Observe. Do not touch." They rose in a choreography I didn't have to cue. Camilla leaned in and inhaled lightly, her nose making judgments you could publish. Tull bent and performed curiosity like a panelist. Father Declan followed directions as if reading from a rubric. Lisette stayed a foot back, eyes on me. Not the cups. like a woman who refuses to be asked to confess. "Tell me," Wolfe said to Camilla, "what your notebook would write if it could. That you don't decant into porcelain you've polished with anything except clean water and a clean conscience," she said. "There's a line of beading at the rim that doesn't lie." "Tull," Wolfe said, "what do you see?" "I see a constructed demonstration," he said, smiling. "I also see a film. I'm not blind." "Father," Wolfe said, "I see pride and fear wrestling," the priest said, "and a residue." "Miss Avery," she kept still. "I see a setup that could be replicated by anyone with a jug and a grudge," she said. "Including me, but I didn't." Wolfe nodded once, satisfied not by truth but by the shape of its resistance. "We will now invite the law to share in our restraint," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, Inspector Kramer will arrive on the hour. Before he does, telephone Mr. Chen and invite him to join us at 12:15. Inform him that absence will be construed as choice." Kramer came on the dot of noon with the steam of a man whose lunch had been cut short by a summons he hadn't issued. He stomped into the office like the parquet had asked for it, his hat still on and his cigar stub making a face of its own. Wolfe didn't rise. But then Wolfe doesn't rise for kings or saints either, so the inspector had to make do with gravity. "All right, Wolfe," Kramer said, planting himself in the red chair as if sitting were a warrant. "Goodwin says somebody's been poisoning teacups, smuggling their fingerprints into your pantry, and sending you orchids. I've had stranger calls, but not many. You've got suspects stacked in your office like cordwood. What's the game?" "The game," Wolfe said smoothly, "is protection. Of my house first, of Miss Avery's establishment, second, and of commerce, third. You will have the satisfaction of witnessing, perhaps even assisting, but not of obstructing." Kramer made a sound that wanted to be a laugh, but came out like a tire losing air. "You tell me I can't obstruct. I feel like obstructing just for the exercise. Now what's with the cups?" I handed him the marked one, already beaded with its smug little circles of water. He squinted, sniffed, and scowled. "Smells like my kid's science fair when he boiled soap." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "A film, applied with a cheap cloth. The method of someone with ambition without refinement." Kramer muttered something about refinements belonging in patisseries, but he set the cup down and lit the cigar stub back into life. The room didn't flinch. It never does. At 12:15 the bell rang again, and I brought Chen into the room. He came in cool as his porcelain showroom, nodded to the others like he was walking into a board meeting, and took the only empty chair. His jacket carried a whiff of incense and starch, and his eyes traveled the office like he was valuing the woodwork. "Mr. Chen," Wolfe said, "your punctuality is commendable." "I respect ritual," Chen replied, folding one ankle over the opposite knee. "What is this ritual?" "The ritual of consequence," Wolfe said. Tull chuckled as if that were a line from a play he already knew. Camilla wrote it down, her pen making tiny scratches like applause. Father Declan sat patient, Lisette stiff as wire. Kramer tapped ash into the tray I'd nudged closer. "So, what's the pitch? You say one of these people smeared detergent on a cup and nearly sent Doyle to Bellevue. Fine. Which one?" Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded but not unfocused. "Not yet," he said. "First we distinguish possibility from plausibility. Archie, recount." I gave them the summary. The tasting, Doyle's scarf theatrics, the Orient Belle brew, the missing lime cloth, the unlocked detergent cabinet, the orchids, the trespass into our pie safe. Chen's eyebrows didn't flicker, though Lisette's jaw twitched when I mentioned the cloth. Tull leaned forward at trespass, eager for spectacle. Camilla stopped writing and watched Wolfe like he might pronounce publication. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "note, the intrusion here was not random. The shim, the glove, the cloth fiber, deliberate, Our intruder wanted me to notice. Yeah, Kramer barked. Or they wanted to get away with tampering and you happened to catch it? No, Wolfe said softly. The tampering achieved nothing but insult. A tea tin can be adulterated anywhere. To do so here was a declaration. Chen shifted in his chair with the calm of a man listening to an accusation rehearsed for someone else. And who declared? He asked. That, Wolfe said. We will see. But the purpose is clearer than the agent. Someone wishes Miss Avery's reputation diminished. Someone wishes Doyle compromised enough to crow but not enough to sue. Someone wishes me involved and irked. And? Camilla asked, pen poised. And they overreached, Wolfe said. A residue on a cup is not murder. It is mischief. Mischief is cowardice in costume. I do not forgive cowardice in my house. The silence stretched long enough for Kramer to grumble. Then what do you want me here for, Wolfe? If this is theater, I don't clap. I want you, Wolfe said, to observe when one of these people reacts unfavorably to truth. He raised a finger toward the line of cups, still wet. The residue demonstrates method. The cloth demonstrates haste. The tread prints, twin and triangular, demonstrate assistance. Someone here knows who provided it. Archie. Yes, sir. Described the man with the cap. I did. Height, build, the triangular tread with the nick, the way he leaned into reflections without smoking, the partner with courier shoulders. Chen's face didn't change, but his fingers twitched once on his knee. Lisette's eyes darted to him like reflex, then back to Wolfe. Tull smiled like he'd already sold the rights to the scene. Mr. Chen, Wolfe said, do your staff wear such shoes? Chen met the question as though it were wine he meant to sip. They buy their own, he said. Trends spread like spills. I cannot stop them. But you can deploy them, Wolfe said. They lingered at Formidable. They lingered here. They left their cloth in an alley. They serve no one's ambition but yours. Speculation, Chen said smoothly. Observation, Wolfe countered. Inspector, have your men collect the cloth and match fibers. They will. Kramer grunted. Fine. And what about motive? Everybody in this room's got one. Doyle won't invest. Tull wants market share. Penworth wants copy. Avery wants to stay afloat. Chen wants to swallow her whole. Indeed, Wolfe said. And Father Declan wants truth, which is motive only in the hands of others. The priest inclined his head, not denying. So pick one, Kramer pressed. Wolfe closed his eyes and let the weight of his body settle further into the chair. Not yet, he repeated. The cloth and the tread tell us the mechanism. The orchids tell us the stage. But we require the hand. Tomorrow evening we will reconvene. Mr. Goodwin will. Gather Mr. Doyle as well. In the meantime, Inspector, you may keep the cloth and cup. Guard them, or better, guard your reputation with them. Kramer cursed under his breath, but he took them. If you're wrong, Wolfe, I'll make you eat detergent. I do not, Wolfe said. Consume detergents. Chen rose smoothly. If this is concluded, I have guests who expect clarity. Good day. Wolfe lifted his eyes enough to halt him. You will be here tomorrow at 7. Refusal will be admission. Good day. Chen paused, the smile thinning, then inclined his head and left. Lisette followed without waiting for dismissal, her heels clicking like a heartbeat. Tull lingered to ask if he could quote Wolfe in a podcast. Wolfe ignored him until he left insulted. Camilla lingered longer, pen scratching her own verdict. Father Declan alone shook Wolfe's hand before departing, murmuring something about patience. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled like the room had been holding its air for him. Archie, he said, tomorrow we will close this. Tonight you will visit Doyle. He is loud, but his noise conceals knowledge. He will tell you who whispered to him before the tasting began. And if he doesn't? I asked. Then, Wolfe said, we will let his scarf do the talking. Doyle's building was the kind that pretends it's guarding Fort Knox when all it's protecting is a lobby full of rugs imported for bragging rights. The doorman recognized me for my last errand and didn't bother with the clipboard. He just tilted his head like he knew Doyle's noise carried up walls, whether you invited it or not. On the 21st floor, Doyle opened his own door in shirt sleeves, tie hanging loose like a truce flag. His voice was back to full throttle, a little raspy but no less eager to fill space. "Goodwin, I figured you'd turn up with a tape recorder and a halo. Wolfe sends his greetings?" "He sends instructions," I said, stepping past him into a living room that had too much leather and too little restraint. "He wants to know who whispered in your ear before the tasting." Doyle's eyes narrowed the way men's do when they're about to either lie or gloat. "Whispered? You think I need whispers? I make my own music." "You make plenty of it," I said, sitting. "But somebody tuned your instrument before you walked in. You don't bring a scarf to a tasting unless you expect a cough. You don't grandstand unless you've rehearsed. Who tipped you?" He poured himself a splash of bourbon that was probably wasted on his throat and rolled it around like it had been prescribed. "Let's say a little bird told me to keep my eyes open. Said there'd be something worth noticing. Didn't say what." "Name the bird," I said. He hesitated, then tried a grin. "You want me to betray my sources? That's bad for business." "Your business nearly got you poisoned," I said. "And Wolfe doesn't like birds unless they stay in their cages. If you want to be useful, you give me the name. Otherwise, tomorrow you get dragged into the brownstone with the rest of the choir, and Wolfe will make you sing off-key." Doyle studied me, then slugged the bourbon. "It wasn't Chen. He's too polished. It wasn't Tull. He's too busy talking to himself. It was Penworth." I let that hang a second. "Camilla told you there'd be a show." She said, "Keep your scarf handy, Harold. Some stains don't wash out." I thought she was being cute. Guess she was being clever. "Cute and clever overlap," I said. "Did she hint at who was aiming the squirt gun?" "No, just smirked like a woman who knows more adjectives than you do. I figured she was teasing, then the cup hit my throat like soap, and I figured maybe she's prophetic." I took that back with me, filing Doyle under ornament, loud but not lethal. Wolfe listened in silence, his eyes closed, hands flat on the chair arms. When I finished, he nodded once. "She warned him," he said. "Deliberately, and in metaphor. Why?" "Either she knew," I said, "or she wanted to seem like she knew." "Precisely," Wolfe murmured. "Vanity again. It threads through this like poor twine. She will face me tomorrow, but not alone. Archie, ensure that Miss Penworth and Mr. Chen arrive punctually at 7. Mr. Tull will be here if only to be heard. Miss Avery cannot resist defending herself. Father Moore will come for truth's sake. And Doyle, if he wishes to hear his own name echoed. We will set the stage." I asked if he wanted more scouting. He shook his head, heavy as an axe head. "No, they have already shown themselves. Tonight Saul will remain out back. Fritz will lock every latch twice. You will keep your eyes open. Tomorrow, we conclude." The next day crawled like a cat before pouncing. At 6:30, the office was arranged. Wolfe seated, orchids removed to the pantry where Fritz could scowl at them. I fielded the arrivals in order. Penworth first, on time, notebook at the ready. Tull second, smirking like he owned the hour. Lisette third, taut as wire. Father Declan fourth, calm and grave. Chen at the stroke of 7, polished to an unnatural gleam. Doyle brought up the rear at 7:10, scarf tucked like a badge of survival. Wolfe waited until they had settled into their chairs, the room packed tight with motives and egos. Then he spoke, his voice slow, deliberate, not needing volume to dominate. "You are here because of a cup. One cup, prepared with the intent of ruin. It did not kill. It wounded reputation, nearly destroyed livelihood, and trespassed into my house. I do not forgive trespass." No one breathed loud. Wolfe's eyes moved from face to face, heavy as weights. The method was simple. Detergent, cloth, a film. The motive was complex. Ambition, envy, vanity. You are all capable of envy. But only one among you enlisted assistance to extend the insult into my pantry. Only one dared send shoes with triangular treads and a lime cloth. Chen shifted, but Wolfe's gaze didn't land on him. Instead, it pinned Penworth. You warned Mr. Doyle. Why? Her pen stilled. She held Wolfe's stare. Because I smelled detergent before anyone else did. The cups. I thought Doyle was too stupid to notice, so I tossed him a line. I didn't lace it. I don't play with poison. Yet you played with insinuation, Wolfe said. Your words made you appear complicit. Your pride savored that appearance. But you are not our saboteur. He turned. Mr. Tull, you delight in performance. You wish to see Miss Avery diminished, to claim her suppliers. But your vanity is too loud. You would have made a stage of it, not a smear. You, too, are dismissed. Tull started to protest, then decided against it. Father, Wolfe said, you consoled. You did not conspire, and Miss Avery— His eyes bored into her. Your pride may blind, but it does not stoop to deceit. You brood, you did not tamper. Lisette's shoulders dropped a fraction, though her eyes stayed sharp. Which leaves Mr. Chen, Wolfe said finally, turning. You sent orchids to Doyle, to me. You sent men to linger in alleys, to trespass in my kitchen. You used cheap tools to mask sophistication. You wanted Avery diminished, Doyle cowed, and me insulted, so that you might ascend as the curator of clarity. But clarity is not obtained by detergent. Chen's smile faltered, but he kept his composure. Accusations are not proof. They are when combined with footprints, Wolfe said. The cloth, the tread, the timing, all yours, and the motive is self-evident. You would have succeeded if not for your arrogance in touching my house. That made it mine. Inspector Kramer will be delighted. The room exhaled. Doyle made a noise halfway between triumph and cough. Lisette's lips parted in relief. Penworth scribbled like the ink itself was testimony. Father Declan bowed his head in silent judgment. Tull frowned, deprived of a spotlight. Chen stood slowly, his mask cracking only at the edges. You are thorough, Mr. Wolfe. But thoroughness is not justice. Justice, Wolfe said, is the correction of imbalances. You attempted imbalance, I correct. Kramer, who had been silent in the corner until then, stepped forward, cigar blazing like a verdict. Chen, you're coming with me. We'll see what you say downtown when the fibers and prints start talking. Chen didn't resist. He just looked at Wolfe with the kind of hatred men reserve for being outplayed. Then he left with Kramer, his shoes making triangular ghosts on the parquet. Wolfe closed his eyes, leaned back, and let the silence seal. Fritz, he called. Dinner. And that was that. The tea that had turned to poison was only leaves again, the brownstone intact, the sanctity restored. Wolfe had done what he always does. Sat still, thought, and crushed vanity under the weight of logic. I walked them all out, one by one, listening to their footsteps fade. When the door shut behind the last of them, I looked back at Wolfe. Some people, I said, buy clarity. You charge extra for it. He grunted, which was as close as he'd come to a laugh. And then the smell of Fritz's roast floated in, erasing detergent, orchids, and ambition in one clean sweep. Dinner that night should have been the curtain drop, but Wolfe doesn't consider cases closed until he's wrung the last drop of sense out of them. Fritz served roast pheasant with black truffle sauce, and the scent filled the brownstone with its usual announcement that life, despite sabotage and detergent, still had its luxuries. Wolfe ate deliberately, chewing as if he was translating meat into philosophy. I tried to coax him into conversation, but he answered with grunts, which meant his brain was still running in chambers I couldn't access. After coffee, he lit a cigar, leaned back, and looked at me. Archie, what remains? I stretched out in my chair. Chen's at the precinct with Kramer's boys. The cloth, the footprints, the cup, all point to him. Doyle's throat will heal. Lisette will stop clenching her teeth, and Penworth will publish something coy about ambition and detergent. That sounds like a rap to me. It is a rap, Wolfe said, but not the knot. I frowned. Meaning? The trespass, he said. To reach into my pantry and alter what was sealed. It was insult, yes, but also communication. Chen had motive enough to sabotage Miss Avery, but arrogance enough to prod me. He is bold, but he is not reckless. He was maneuvered. I blinked. You're saying Chen was the actor, but not the author? Precisely. He exhaled smoke that curled like punctuation. We must consider who benefited from Chen's exposure, who among the circle wished him discredited as much as Avery threatened. That one turned in my head. Tull wanted Avery diminished, but had no reason to set Chen ablaze. Doyle wanted discounts, not vendettas. Father Declan wasn't playing, which left Penworth, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. She's clever enough to scent detergent, clever enough to drop a warning into Doyle's ear, clever enough to arrange for Chen to seem the culprit, with the evidence unsubtle and the trespass flamboyant. Chen believed himself cunning. He did not realize he was visible. I whistled. So you let Chen hang himself while the real puppeteer sat in your office scribbling adjectives. Wolfe nodded once. Tomorrow we shall tidy it. Miss Penworth will return for her closing lines. The next morning, Fritz's muffins were current and morale restoring. I called Penworth at her office. She sounded pleased, as if she had expected my call. Of course, she said. I'd be delighted to hear Wolfe's postscript. 3, I confirmed, though Wolfe had told me 2:30. He likes his nets in place before the fish swims. At 2:15, she arrived in a tailored grey suit that wrote its own review. Her pen was already in her hand when she stepped into the office. Wolfe sat as immovable as a verdict. I stationed myself by the globe, where I could watch both her face and Wolfe's. Miss Penworth, Wolfe said, his voice even. You performed with your usual grace yesterday, but I dislike unfinished scores. Let us conclude. She crossed her legs, notebook balanced. Of course. I assumed Inspector Kramer had carried off the villain, and that was that. Inspector Kramer carried off Mr. Chen, Wolfe said, which was necessary, but not sufficient. He acted, yes, but not alone. His actions bore the hallmarks of orchestration. Her eyes flickered just once before settling back into professional poise. And you think I was the conductor? I know you were, Wolfe said calmly. You anticipated the detergent. You warned Doyle, cryptically, so that his collapse would crown you with prescience. You let Chen strut into visibility while you faded into the role of observer. But you could not resist vanity. You dropped crumbs. Your note about the cups, your smirk at Doyle, your performance of neutrality. She smiled faintly. Wolfe, that's a flattering narrative. But I write stories, not sabotage them. Why would I risk reputation for a trick? Because, Wolfe said, your profession rewards exclusivity. To publish a piece exposing ambition, rivalry, and even the downfall of a pretender like Chen would cement you as the chronicler of tea wars. You are not a saboteur by nature, but an opportunist. You nudged the game board, then sat back to report on the pieces falling. Chen was your instrument, Doyle your stage, Avery your foil. She tapped her pen against the notebook, once, twice. That's delicious, Mr. Wolfe. You should consider column writing. Wolfe ignored her flippancy. Your hand is visible in the trespass. Chen's men entered, yes, but who told them where my key was kept and how I secure my tins? Only someone who had observed here before. You were here the morning prior, under pretense of courtesy. You glanced at the kitchen as Fritz carried out trays. You saw the key bowl. You filed it away." I remembered. She had asked Fritz whether he steeped his own blends. A glance, no more. I hadn't thought twice. Her smile thinned. "Suppose, for amusement, you're correct. What then?" "Then," Wolfe said, "you are the author. Chen is the actor. The law will handle him. Society will handle you. Your article will never see print, because I will see to it that Mr. Cohen is better informed. And if you attempt to publish slander, Inspector Kramer will be reminded of the cloth, the footprints, and your warning to Doyle." Her pen hovered over the paper, then snapped shut. "So you're not handing me to the police?" "You are guilty of manipulation, not murder," Wolfe said. "You sought drama, not death. You will be silent. That is your sentence." She rose, smoothed her suit, and for the first time looked unsettled. "You underestimate what silence costs a writer." "No," Wolfe said. "I do not. That is why it suits you." She left with her poise frayed at the edges. When the door shut, Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing in the satisfaction of completion. I said, "So Chen plays Patsy, Kramer gets his arrest, Penworth gets her silence, and Avery gets her reputation back." "Not back," Wolfe murmured. "Reforged. Scandal once survived can be strength. She will learn humility, or perish." "And us?" I asked. He opened one eye. "We eat." Fritz appeared at the door as if summoned, bearing a dish of custard flavored with bel oolong, the Orient kind that had nearly started a war. The scent was honeyed, toasted, innocent. Wolfe took his spoon, dipped, and tasted. "As I thought," he said. "Leaves are harmless. It is men who are venom." I couldn't argue. I just grinned, because when Nero Wolfe closes a case with dessert, you know the world, however crooked, has bent back into place. The thing about Wolfe is, when he says a case is finished, it's finished. But when he says nothing, when he leans back in the big chair and lets silence creep in like ivy, that means he's still gnawing on some invisible bone. After Penworth left, I thought he'd retreat upstairs to his orchids or fall into a post-custard stupor. But instead he sat, eyes shut, lips pressed tight, while the smoke from his cigar traced thin hieroglyphs above the desk. I've seen that look before. It's the look that means something still isn't tucked in neatly enough for his taste. I decided to speed things up. "Spill it," I said. "You've already tripped Chen, gagged Penworth, and handed Kramer a scalp. So why do you look like Fritz forgot the salt?" Wolfe's eyes opened slowly, heavy lids lifting with effort. "Because," he said, "vanity explains method, ambition explains motive, but there remains an absence of proportion. Chen did not intend to kill, only to blemish. Penworth wished for drama, not ruin. Yet Doyle was very nearly hospitalized with a corroded throat. That excess bothers me." I frowned. "So what you're saying is, detergent was supposed to be a splash of scandal, not a chemical bath. Somebody overpoured." "Exactly," Wolfe said. He puffed on the cigar, exhaling with precision. "That discrepancy suggests either incompetence or interference. Neither pleases me." I thought it over. Doyle's scarf had been more than a prop. It had been wrecked. The doctors said caustic but non-lethal. But that was inches from worse. If Chen wanted theater, he could have dosed a cup with something mild. If Penworth wanted spectacle, she could have relied on insinuation. So who wanted Doyle closer to the obituary page than the gossip column? I asked him. Wolfe tapped ash into the tray, his gaze flat. Doyle himself, perhaps. Men intoxicated by attention sometimes sip their own poison. I snorted. You think he spiked his own cup? That's one hell of a stunt to pull just for headlines. Not impossible, Wolfe said. But more likely he was a pawn of more than one hand. Sabotage layered upon sabotage. Chen's men film the cup. Penworth lets him blunder, but Doyle's vanity delivers the final measure. That was enough to keep me occupied for the evening. I dropped in on Doyle again around 9, uninvited. His doorman tried to stall me, but Doyle himself heard my voice and called down to send me up, his tone equal parts annoyance and curiosity. He was in a robe this time, scarf draped like a wounded soldier. A half-empty glass of bourbon sat on the coffee table beside him, and his cheeks were redder than his reputation. "Goodwin," he said. "What, you want a quote? Tell Wolfe I've already had enough autopsies of my stomach contents." "I want clarity," I said. "You're a man who likes drama. You like being the headline. Did you ever think the poison wasn't meant for you?" That sobered him faster than any coffee. He squinted. "Not meant for me. Who else was sitting at that table, Goodwin? Father Declan. He's too saintly to notice. Toll. He'd have turned it into a marketing scheme. Camilla. She'd have written it into scripture. Lisette. She bruised the stuff. Who else but me?" "You tell me," I said. "Did anyone suggest you make a show of it? Did you have help staging your scarf routine?" Doyle bristled. "Routine? That scarf saved my suit. I don't stage collapses, Goodwin. I'm not that desperate." "Then explain this," I said. "The doctors found more detergent in your throat than any accidental smear should have delivered. Someone either overdid the dosage or wanted you down longer than you were. If Chen was the saboteur, he overshot. If Penworth nudged him, she risked too much, unless someone else added a hand." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, he said, "The scarf wasn't mine. Not really. Someone slipped it to me earlier that evening, said it was silk from Kashmir, a gift for the performance. I thought it was a joke." My scalp prickled. "Who?" He swallowed. "Tull. Grayson Tull. He said every actor needs a prop. I figured he was mocking me. But when the burn hit, it was the only thing I had." That was enough for me. I left Doyle with his bourbon and his nerves and headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, a fresh beer in hand, eyes half-lidded but not asleep. When I relayed Doyle's scarf story, he grunted low in his throat. "Ah," he said. "Mr. Tull. Too loud, too eager, too present. He could not resist participating." "But you dismissed him," I said. "I dismissed his capacity for subtlety," Wolfe corrected. "Not for mischief. He provided Doyle with a prop. Silk, he said. Perhaps treated with residue, perhaps not, but a gesture that tethered Doyle to him. That complicates the narrative." I sat, watching Wolfe's bulk shift slightly as he leaned forward. "So Chen's ambition supplied the mechanism, Penworth's vanity supplied the framing, and Tull, what? Supplied the gasoline?" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Three ambitions intersecting. Chen wanted to supplant Avery. Penworth wanted a spectacle. Tull wanted to be indispensable to the outcome. The result was excess. Doyle's throat bore it." I whistled low. "So we're not talking one culprit. We're talking a coalition of idiots." "Idiots with intelligence," Wolfe murmured. "Which is worse. They will devour each other now that I have separated them. My task was to protect my house. Miss Avery's to salvage her salon. Both are accomplished, but Kramer will relish untangling their mutual betrayals." "And Doyle?" I asked. "Doyle will recover," Wolfe said. "But he will never again sip without suspicion. That may save his life one day." The case should have ended there, tied off like Fritz's roast twine. But Wolfe, after a long sip of beer, said something that made me pause at the door. "Archie, tomorrow invite Miss Avery back at noon. Alone. She deserves the truth uncluttered by the others." So I called her in the morning. She arrived exactly at 12. No more wire-taut, but wary, like someone stepping into a ring. Wolfe told her the story in his deliberate way. Chen's bluster, Penworth's orchestration, Tull's meddling. She listened without interrupting, her jaw working but her voice restrained. At the end, she asked one question. "And you, Mr. Wolfe? Why involve yourself at all?" Wolfe folded his hands. Because, Miss Avery, someone tampered with what entered my house. I do not permit that. You may manage your rivals, but my kitchen is inviolable. She absorbed that, then nodded once. Thank you. She stood, handed me her card again, and left without a backward glance. When the door shut, I turned to Wolfe. That's it? You don't care whether she thrives or folds? She will thrive, Wolfe said, because she knows now that her pride nearly destroyed her. Whether she heeds the lesson is not my affair. He leaned back, eyes closing as Fritz's call for lunch drifted from the kitchen. Archie, never forget, tea is leaves, men make it poison. And with that, he rose, not to chase orchids or justice, but to chase his appetite. The case of the tea that turned to poison was finished. Layered, messy, human, but finished. And if Wolfe had taught me anything, it was that closure isn't clean. It just sits, heavy as his chair, until the world rearranges around it. I have a rule about closure. If I can't hear Wolfe thinking anymore, the case is truly over. That afternoon, the brownstone had the sound of forks, the smell of thyme, and no thinking noises from the office. Fritz was humming. Theodore was misting. If there was a loose thread, it was hiding under the rug. I was at my desk adding numbers when the doorbell announced someone who believed in doors. It was Father Declan with a bakery box and an apology for interrupting digestion. He said he had come to close a circle. I brought him to the office. Wolfe was there, resting like a mountain. He gave the priest the nod required by courtesy. I am not your penitent, Wolfe said. Nor I your catechist, Father Declan answered, setting the box on the desk. Scones, olive oil and lemon, a peace offering to a house that endured trespass. Wolfe inhaled, decided forgiveness could be scented, and gestured to a chair. I wanted to say, the priest went on, that Miss Avery intends to keep her staff, petition the department for a voluntary inspection, and invite Miss Penworth to write nothing at all. Humility arrived disguised as relief. Good, Wolfe said. Her coffee is competent, her tea is not relevant. What of Mr. Chen? Inspector Kramer telephoned me, the priest said. Chen is considering a plea, admission to trespass and endangerment. Mr. Tull's involvement with the scarf has surfaced. The district attorney will decide how much lesson ambition requires. That's the world's chore, Wolfe said. Mine is lunch. The priest smiled. Then I am in the way. One last thing. When people arrange harm, they often began by arranging good. Mr. Chen did not start with poison. He started with performance. Somewhere along the way he met vanity and mistook it for vision. I do not psychoanalyze vermin, Wolfe said. I remove them from the pantry. Father Declan rose. A tidy theology. He shook my hand and left the scones to do ecumenical work. After he'd gone, Wolfe eyed the box as if it might convert him. 2 for later, he told me. The remainder for Fritz. Kramer calling a priest about Chen, I said. Kramer likes outcomes, Wolfe said. The priest is a conduit. Mr. Cohen is another. You will call him. Lon Cohen receives calls like confetti. When I gave him the digest, with the caution that our house didn't want its role at center stage, he whistled and promised a restrained item heavy on department competence and light on private kitchens. By 5, the orchids were no longer glaring from the pantry. Fritz had dismantled the arrangement and rehomed the blooms. The copper tin went to a high shelf with a label to make a district attorney smile. Archival, not for use. The pie-safe key reoccupied its hook. At 6:45, the bell tried again. Lisette Avery, no longer taught, came in wearing work clothes that looked like she'd told them what to do and they'd done it. She carried a brown envelope. We took her to the office. Wolfe was where she had left him. I brought your fee, she said, putting the envelope on the blotter, and a receipt for the detergent you stole. Borrowed, I said. Borrowed, she allowed. I also brought a list of changes, protocols, signage, a locked cabinet with a lock that would trouble St. Peter. She met Wolfe's eyes. And an apology for the tin, even if I didn't send it. My world leaked into yours. Your world knocked, Wolfe said. I answered, the fee is correct. She named a number that didn't make me wince. Wolfe said it was acceptable. I have a condition, she said. Wolfe's brows moved a fraction. You are not in a posture to impose one. It favors you, she said. A monthly shipment of Orient Belle to your cook, labeled for custards only. No blossoms, no cards. Fritz accepts reparations, Wolfe said, when they are digestible. Good, she said. And Mr. Goodwin, thank you for not turning my salon into a slideshow. We ate at 8. Risotto with peas coaxed out of stock. Beer for Wolfe, a glass of white for me. After, he addressed the room as if it had earned a lecture. Archie, he said, what do men learn from tea? That if you call it liquor, Doyle will drink it, I said. Bah. They learn that patience alters leaves and appetite alters patience. A leaf bitten by a leaf hopper becomes Belle by injury. Men bitten by vanity become bitter. Put it on a pillow, I said. He ignored me. The case was never about poison, it was about intrusion. The remedy is arrangement, keys to hooks, cloths to shelves, people to proportion. I was reaching for a last scone when the phone rang. Kramer. It's tied, he said. Chen folds on the trespass, gives up his cat boys, pukes contrition. Tull pays a fine for contributing to a public nuisance. Your friend Doyle gave us the scarf provenance after you nudged him. Penworth evaporates. You're welcome, I said. Don't start, Kramer growled, then softened a degree. You kept it tidy? Tell Wolfe. No, don't. He knows. He hung up. I told Wolfe anyway. He grunted. By 10, the city was doing its best imitation of sleep. I checked the locks, looked at the now honorable key hook, and set the cloche over the archival tin. Wolfe was in the office, the last of his beer contemplating him back. Done? I asked. Done, he said. I turned off the lamp and left him to the dark. In the hall, the house exhaled a quiet breath, and I had the sturdy feeling you get when the proportions are right. Appetite satisfied, justice balanced, doors secure. The tea had turned to poison and back again. The brownstone had been disturbed and restored, and Nero Wolfe, immovable as a verdict, had earned his quiet. That's closure. You can't bottle it, but in that house, you can taste it. Late and clear. The final chapter did. Not begin with a doorbell or a package, but with silence, the kind that meant the brownstone had exhaled after days of trespass and uproar. Fritz polished the silver as if the world had never heard of detergent in a teacup, and Theodore reported that the orchids had survived their neglect with less complaint than their caretaker. It was evening, and the lamps glowed warm across the office. Wolfe sat in his chair, square and heavy as judgment, while I leaned back at my desk with a glass of rye. You are fidgeting, he said, not opening his eyes. Only because I keep waiting for the next shoe to drop, I told him. Chen's locked up, Penworth's licking her silence, Tull's paying fines, Avery's counting her leaves, Doyle's gargling whiskey. Seems too neat. Neatness, Wolfe murmured, is not a condition of life. It is a condition of arrangement. We arranged this. I let that sit, then asked the thing still circling my head. So, which of them was it really? Chen with his goons, Penworth with her pen, or Tull with his scarf? His eyes opened, yellow-brown in the lamplight. All of them. That was the point. Chen's ambition supplied the act. Penworth's vanity supplied the narrative. Tull's meddling supplied the excess. Each alone would have achieved nuisance. Together, they achieved calamity. But they did not mean to conspire. They intersected. And intersections are where carriages collide. I grinned. You make it sound like the whole mess solved itself." "Hardly," Wolfe said. "Left unattended, it would have consumed Miss Avery's enterprise, emboldened Mr. Chen, ruined Doyle, and sullied my house. I corrected proportions. That is my métier." The phone rang, and I answered. It was Kramer, terse but not unfriendly. "Chen folded like a cheap umbrella," he said. "Admitted the trespass, gave up the boys with the shoes. Tull's paying off the scarf stunt, and Penworth's keeping quiet. Doyle's talking too much, but that's not new. Wolfe there." I relayed the digest. Wolfe nodded once and said into the receiver, "Thank you, Inspector. Try not to drink tea." Then he hung up before Kramer could sputter. The room settled again. I poured myself another splash, then looked at Wolfe. "You know, if you ever wrote all this down yourself, you'd put me out of a job." "Pa," he said, "you're indispensable for the vulgarities." "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me," I told him. He shut his eyes again, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Archie, what is the moral?" "The moral," I said, "is don't let rivalries near your pantry." "No," he said, voice heavy as a closing book. "The moral is simpler. Leaves are harmless, certes, men are poison, and vanity is the cup they pour it in." Fritz came then, bearing a platter of lamb shanks perfumed with rosemary. The scent banished the last ghost of detergent. Wolfe opened his eyes, reached for his fork, and declared the case closed without another word. I'll say it for him. The tea that turned to poison had left a bitter taste in plenty of mouths, but in the end, appetite won out. And if you ask me, that's the closest thing to Justice Wolfe ever truly trusted.